All right, bestie, let's talk about pressure waveforms on a ventilator part one. Bear with me while I try a different setup here for illustrative purposes. So for a pressure graphic, there's a few things you need to know. On the x-axis, pressure is measured in time, and on our y-axis, it's measured in, of course, pressure. For the sake of the example, I numbered this to reflect PEEP, which is positive and expiratory pressure, heavy on the pressure. With that out the way, let's get a generic idea of what these waveforms can look like. So on this first waveform, we refer to it as a shark fin, and I assume that you are smart enough to know why. Waveforms can vary in shapes, and usually that's a direct result of the mode that the patient is in and what is happening with their breath. So here's another shape we have here. This is, let's call this the box. And then here's the box on Ozempic. More about sizes later. So let's look into how pressure is reflected in a breath. So I'm going to give you an example of 3 breaths. We're going to label it for a better understanding. So just hang tight. Here we go. Boom, bam, done. So listen, when this up arrow that I'm drawing here, this is going to reflect an inspiratory breath, aka like a deep breath in. Then you're going to have at the height of that breath, you're going to have a peak. That peak is referred to as a peak inspiratory pressure, or PIP, P-I-P. This is the highest pressure reached at the end of an inspiratory breath. You're going to then have a down arrow that's going to reflect your expiratory breath. And at the very bottom of that expiratory breath, you're going to have an exhalation. And then I will backtrack and I will go ahead and label them after the fact. I also incorrectly spelled a word I tried to shorthand, but we're going to own it and we're going to move on. See, boom, done. Look what I did there. Act like you didn't see that. So listen, as a patient is breathing in completely, we reach the PIP and then exhale. So I want you to notice that my breath doesn't meet the bottom of the x-axis, and that's because my patient is on a PEEP of 5, which is my baseline, not 0, hence why it's not at the very bottom. So that's the easy way of always being able to read where your patient is at on their PEEP. So these breaths ideally will continue until, in this case, they don't. So let's look at what happens when a breath might look different. Boom, look at technology working for me. So let's look at what it could look like. So in this case, sometimes as a RT, we have to do a breath hold maneuver on patients. This is done on the ventilator and it's called an inspiratory hold. So in this case, your breath is going to look a lot different. So when we do this, we will have our peak inspiratory pressure, PIP, but now we introduce what's called a plateau pressure, aka a Pplat. It helps to assess lung compliance and resistance and if there's an issue. It's always performed at the end of inspiration. So notice the difference with these waveforms. They still provide us a picture, but pressure, they provide us a picture about pressure, but it just, one is providing us more detail. So another detail to mention is that each breath provides what we call a map. This is known as a mean airway pressure. Our map is going to represent the average pressure across inspiration and expiration phase of breathing. So it tells us a lot about how I'm just stuttering. It tells us a lot about how well this patient is oxygenating. I'm over here trying to erase stuff and multitask, and I'm